So good morning, everybody that's on. Thank you very much for coming out this early in the morning here. Well, for some people, it's earlier than others, and learning a little bit more about eShepherd this morning. So thank you for joining us here. Okay, Adam, we'll move to the next slide, please.
Je mets sur le grand écran?
So
Ça t'intéresse ou pas?
somebody's got their mic not muted here, Adam. So the purpose of the day as an introduction to the eShepherd system. We're going to be discussing that. Pricing analysis, Felipe from TRU University will be commenting on that. Comments by Julie Robertson, the range officer from the Peace Region, Ministry of Forests. Case study, we'll be discussing the case study on the Thiessen Brothers Ranch in Fort St. John. And wrapping up the question and answers. We anticipate today will probably take hour to hour and a half kind of thing, and feel free after to hang around for the question and answer period here. So Okanagan Ranch and Fence Supplies, we just recently rebranded ourselves, but my wife and I started this business back in 1985. And as we've grown the business over the years and recently have brought my daughter and son-in-law, Sarah Fennell, and her husband, Adam Kubel, onto our team to help continue grow our company and particularly grow this eShepherd phase of Okanagan Ranch and Fence Supplies. We're a unique company that specializes in products that particularly support working ranches and farms in British Columbia and throughout Western Canada. And we just lost the screen, Adam.
Just 1 sec, folks. I gotta fix something here. Just 2 seconds. There we go. Sorry, and we missed this slide here, Lee.
So, for housekeeping, as I mentioned, we anticipate this meeting to be an hour and a half this morning. The webinar is being recorded and it'll be posted after on YouTube. Here's the link here. We can also share that out to all the registrants that are joining us this morning. The questions will be answered at the end. So if you have questions that come up, feel free to put it in the chat. And we're also hosting another webinar in early January. We're looking having a speaker from OFCAP has come as well. And this meeting notes will be emailed out after as well. So we did that. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is turn this meeting over to Sarah. And Sarah can step you through and go from there. Okay, good morning, Sarah.
Good morning. So I'm going to talk to you today about what is virtual fencing. So there's been a number of journal articles written about what virtual fencing is. It's essentially a livestock management tool where you use invisible barriers, which are connected by a GPS system, and you're able to put your cattle in virtual paddocks, and you don't need to actually have any physical fences, and the cattle are kept contained using a combination of auditory and electrical cues. So there are definitely a number of benefits of having virtual fencing. So you're able to create custom pasture boundaries. So that way you can do whatever your management goals are, whether it's to do rotational grazing or exclude cattle from sensitive areas. You're able to reduce your labor. So instead of actually building fences, you can control your cattle from your virtually from your laptop or your phone. So you don't have to actually go out and pound fence posts or anything. With virtual fencing, you can do advanced grazing practices that may not be possible if you were doing physical fencing, because you're able to create fences wherever you like very quickly. So you don't have to go and plan out your fencing and hire somebody to build these fences. And so you can do advanced grazing practices like rotational grazing, and that helps improve your pasture health. It also enhances control of livestock movement. So your cattle have a GPS tracker on them, so you're able to figure out where they are. So you don't have to spend time looking for them. There are a number of applications that you can use virtual fencing for. So I had mentioned you could exclude cattle from areas. So you can include them in an area by creating a pasture, but you can also keep them out of area. So if you have sensitive habitats, you can keep them out of that area. If you're doing rotational grazing, you can move your cattle throughout your virtual paddocks. If you're interested in doing wildfire risk mitigation, you can do targeted grazing to reduce understory fuels. And it's very helpful in areas that you're wanting to just put your cattle in that are in remote, or you're leasing land and you don't want to spend the money on infrastructure. Another application that we've had folks doing is in areas where there's been wildfire, and so there are no fences that are existing, so you can easily and quickly put up virtual fences. So there are currently 2 options for virtual fencing in Canada. There are more than these 2 providers of virtual fencing, but in Canada, these are the only 2 that are available. So today we're going to be focusing on the Gallagher eShepherd, manufactured by Gallagher, but there's also No Fence. And so Gallagher has 2 options for connectivity. You can either do cellular if your area has sufficient cellular connectivity, or you can do LoRa. And we'll talk a little bit later about what LoRa actually means. And then No Fence is another brand, and it's from Norway, but it's just cellular. I turn it over to Adam.
Perfect. So the eShepherd system, it's a virtual fencing system. It's, again, as Sarah was saying, it's one of a few that are out there, but there's a few benefits to this one, which makes it rather unique in context. So firstly, we can manage the system remotely by laptop, cell phone, or tablet. With the laptop, you don't have to download any external software to your machine. So it's a web app, meaning that you could manage your herds from your home, from your neighbor's house, or on vacation from a hotel business lobby, if that was your thing. They also have really good cell phone and tablet support with a mobile app download. And what that does is it allows your cell phone to activate the GPS and drop pins so you can delineate where you'd like your new fences to go. And so instead of just simply drawing them by hand as you could on a laptop, using some of the features of your cell phone, you could actually drop geolocations as to where you want those fences to physically be and get a really high degree of accuracy. The other thing with the cell phone and tablet is there's an RFID reader that's enabled inside of your cell phone with the mobile download, which allows you to associate the collar from eShepherd with your animal's EID tag on their ear. So it makes it really easy to assign a collar to a really large herd in the field. With eShepherd as well, they've got robust online support. So a lot of folks would struggle with the technical learning curve with a system like this, but Shepherd has a really good repository of webinars, quick reference guides, etc., for folks to go through. And with Okanagan Ranch and Fence, we do provide Tier 1 and Tier 2 support for anybody who's trying to set up the fences or has questions, and would effectively be a first line of defense for technical issues. With this eShepherd system, it's quite humane in its design. So it's principally a sound-based animal reinforcement, rather than electric pulse. Now, there is an electric pulse reinforcement as well, but over time, after enough training has gone through, the animals will respond 85 to 90% or 95% of the time to just a single auditory cue. So what happens is, over a period of 10 days or so, the animals will get used to the system. They will breach the virtual fence line, and then they'll be met with an auditory tone. 30 seconds after that auditory tone, they'll be met with an electric pulse, and that'll happen for 3 successive times. And then the animal will begin to associate the audio tone with the electric pulse. So we're using some conditional or animal conditioning or animal training to associate the noise with an aversive stimulus. So what this does is it principally allows the animals to be contained just by sound without necessarily defaulting to electric shock every time. A lot of folks do have questions on what's the strength or power of the electric shock. It's about 2.5 kV. So it's close to or it's a little less than most electric fences. However, it's because of its placement around the animal's neck, you've got a really good direct point of contact. So even though it's a little bit lighter, it gives really good connection and really good stimulus in that regard. So this will contain bulls as well as most types of cattle. The Shepherd system is solar powered, so you don't have to worry about battery packs or charging. So you've got solar panels directly on the system as well. And as Sarah said, it's GPS enabled, so you have a really good display of where your animals are live in the field. You're always able to see where they are in a lot of safety features with the eShepherd system as well. So you've got a breakaway strap on the top, which pulls off at around 750 pounds of pressure. So it's not coming off anytime soon, but if your animal got hung up, it would break away in an emergency. You're unable to assign herds or animals to a paddock or a virtual fence area without first identifying water features in the area. So it prevents you from accidentally assigning animals to an area that has no water. There's return to paddock and cool down features on this as well. So if for whatever reason your animal was to breach through the virtual paddock, after 3 times of an auditory tone and then an electric pulse, it would go into a hibernation mode. So that would allow your animal to not be continuously stimulated outside of the virtual paddock. So when they come back to the herd or re-enter the herd, the virtual fence lines will come back up, and then they will be met with electrical stimulation or auditory pulse if they were to exit the paddock. So it just prevents them from being overly stimulated. You also get a lot of animal and equipment notifications. So if the collar's not moving effectively, you'll get a notification for that, indicating most likely that the animal's sleeping, but could also be that the collar's fallen off or something of concern. There's lots of notifications as to the battery strength, the signal strength, and there's also what's called a 3-axis accelerometer inside, which basically would detect if the animal's running. So it doesn't tell you that there's a predator in the area, but it would give you a good indication that the animals are behaving in a way that might be a little unusual. With this as well, there's a 24-hour fail-safe inside of with the system. So if for whatever reason sorry, Jim Forbes, could you just mute, please? So if for whatever reason the cell phone towers or satellites were to go down for maintenance, your virtual paddocks would stay up for 24 hours, which would allow you to come up with a workaround or deal with your herd with a 24-hour window without the system going down. So how does it work? So principally, it's all about training. So in that 7 to 10 day period. Yes.
Are you going to do questions as we go, or you want those at the end? I just noticed in the chat someone come up, and sometimes it's hard to see when you're presenting. So I wasn't sure how you were going to handle that.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I didn't have that up. So is there a notification if they go through the fence? You'll get an alert on the laptop app that will indicate whether or not an animal has breached through. So you'll know exactly what animal did that and at what time. So forms a record. Because the GPS enablement as well, you're actually able to see the animal's movement over a period of time. So you could zero in on an individual animal and see where they moved over a week and identify if they actually broke out of the fence as well. So it gives you really good information in that regard. Great question. And I'll try to grab these as best as I can, and Sarah's on these as well. So as Sarah mentioned, these are connected by LTE-M for the cellular neckbands, or LoRa or long range for the LoRa style neckband. 2 different styles of neckbands. One being principally used for when your cell provider connection is decent in an area. So that's the cellular neckbands. That's the principal mode of communication. That when Gallagher made these years ago, that it was based on use cases in New Zealand where they've got really good coverage for cell networks. In British Columbia and in Canada, we've got a lot of down spots or spotty areas for connectivity. So the LoRa neckbands is the most practical use case for most of us in British Columbia here today. And with the LoRa, you're still going to be using a cellular network, but you're going to be using the 4G network. So there can be limitations in coverage there. And there's workarounds as well. So if you do have poor coverage in your area, you can use the Starlink satellite system for pretty much omnipresent connectivity to the neckbands. So there's 2 different styles of neckbands. We'll walk through both today as well. So your paddocks, you can draw them on freehand via a laptop or use your cell phone to delineate the exact location you'd like them to be set up. And you can also manage a group or herd or an individual animal. So in a use case, say you've got some bulls and you want to separate them from the herd, but you still want to have them in the same general area, you can do that. If you have an individual animal that you want to, for whatever reason, isolate, you can do that as well. So it's pretty dynamic in that regard, where you can have multiple herds, or one herd, but multiple paddocks and multiple configurations between it. So yeah, it's pretty useful in that regard. You can also move the herd with the virtual fencing. So effectively, you would collapse a fence behind a herd and open up a new runway in front of the others, and it would slowly push the animal along. So they would just receive the auditory tone in most cases, which would cause them to give a movement that you're looking for. This is also how you enable the rotational grazing, and I'll show you what that looks like in practice in a second. But that function can be auto-scheduled, so you can have it set up to operate at certain time periods or certain intervals or certain days of the week, whatever makes sense for you and your range plan. So here's just a quick logic diagram of how this thing communicates for the LoRa communications. Again, this is what you'd see in British Columbia most commonly. So you have your cattle here with their collars on. You're going to have constant GPS connectivity. It's near real time. So on your screen, on your laptop and your cell phone, etc., you'll see about a 10-minute delay of where the animal is. but the system is going to operate in real time so that you know exactly when that animal crosses that perimeter or that fence line. When communication is being sent to the callers, so if you're changing the paddock size or you're trying to get information about breaches, etc., it's going to follow a channel where communications go to the LoRa base station. So this is what makes the LoRa neckbands unique, is that you do need what's called a base station. This will go through pricing and tell you what this looks like, but it's effectively an amplification system of a signal if you've got poor coverage in an area or reduced cell phone coverage. So it's not a cell tower, but it is an amplifier effectively. Once it hits that base station, it'll push either to your Starlink or to a nearby 4G cell tower, which will then go to a cloud database through eShepherd and present on your phone so you can see what's happening. Conversely, if you want to send communications, you could follow the exact same pathway. If you only have, what's the question? Sorry. If only the cell towers in your area is 3G, will it still work? So for LoRa, you'll need 4G. For the cellular neckbands, if you've got good coverage, that would work. With that particular style of neckband. And that kind of gets to the next comment here, is because this is a complicated communications channel, there's absolutely it's very hard for most prospective users to know which product is right for them, what configuration is right for them. So working with Okanagan Ranch and Fence to figure out your topography, the coverage of your cell phone providers, and help you figure out where the best place to stick your base stations is absolutely key. A lot of folks ask, how big of a range can I get with a base station? So you can have your cattle up to about 14 kilometers away from the base station itself, so a pretty good distance, but that's in absolutely perfect topography conditions. So there aren't any tree lines, base stations at an elevated plane, and you don't have any line of sight breaks as well. And this does work with no cell phone service at all. That's effectively the point with this one. With the base station and a connectivity to Starlink, you do not need to have cell phone coverage at all. If you do have some cell coverage that's 4G, this will work, but the Starlink would be generally the best recommendation for those in British Columbia because the constant connectivity, which is generally our recommendation. But again, the topography heavily influences where the base station goes, etc. So just work with one of us from Okanagan Ranch and we'll figure out the best place to go for you. The other thing to note is with Starlink, that's not a product that we provide or that is provided through Gallagher. That's a separate purchase that needs to be done by a producer. But working with Okanagan Ranch and eShepherd, we can configure it to work for you. So it's not a factory supported or not a factory procured device, but we can make it work for you. If you have trees, yeah, just heavy tree cover. It'll work. It will work, but you just don't want to have in the middle of a wooded area kind of thing for your base station. Just you want to be able to have a good opportunity for communications. They'll still work in covered range areas and connect to your cattle, but you would like to have best case conditions limited to no trees. Now that doesn't mean it won't work. It just means that you might have to physically move the base station closer to the animals in range land. So there's lots of configurations that we can do. With the cell phone communications, it's basically the same workflow. The difference being is now you don't have a LoRa base station. You don't have the amplification system. So as Anne was asking for 3G coverage, this is what would work. The 3G or the LTM, these could work together. So it's the same pathway effectively, just without the base station. And because of that, these can have faster communications to the callers and to set up paddocks. There needs to be a clear line of view to callers to the base station. Yeah, ideally there's a clear line of view. And again, up to 14 kilometers distance with the base station, that's the best case. But the more topography variables you have, the more reduced it could be. That's why working with someone to help identify the most strategic place to place the base station is going to be absolutely key for folks. So with the base stations themselves, on the right here, this is what they look like coming from eShepherd. So it's going to be pretty modular. It does require some assembly, but they do provide you all you've got an antenna on top, a solar panel, a gateway, which is effectively the brains of the unit, and a base, which can be securely fastened into the ground. These do require power. It comes with a solar panel from Gallagher, but you can operate these also with a daisy chain of solar panel if you want, or you can have them configured to 120 volt power as well if you're able to somehow run power to these things. Connectivity wise, so again, these aren't a cell tower, they just amplify the strength. So you still need a Starlink or LTE connectivity. Again, topography is your greatest influence here. So we do need to be very cautious or careful as to where we place these things, just so you have the best use case for what you're intending to do. As you can see in the picture here, this is New Zealand. This is on top of a really high hill, no trees, no obstruction, really good line of sight. This is probably your most ideal case. If you had a lot of trees in your area, we might want to move the base station a little closer to where you're proposing to put the cattle, etc., being cognizant that the signal strength might be a little bit reduced. So the next comment is work with Okanagan Ranch Defense. We'll work with you and figure out what's the best product, cellular neckband or LoRa, and where's the best place to stick your base stations. So I'm going to do a quick demo of what eShepherd looks like in practice. I'm just going to pull up some live data. I'm going to stop sharing for a sec, and I'm going to pull up the screen. There you go. So here's a view of what the product looks like in the field. So we've got the white lines here. These are physical fence barriers that have been uploaded by a KML file. So if you can delineate and get a KML file, you can upload these directly, or you can draw these by hand. We have our water point here, and you can see the producers come up with a training area. So this is where they originally trained or would have trained the animals to get used to the collared system. And over time, slowly increasing the paddock and giving them more area to graze upon, and then closing the gate behind. So this is how you get that rotational grazing. You can time these moves so that the animals can be slowly pushed. So you can push them around your field if you wanted to, or you can move them to other pastures or paddocks by using this kind of a slow approach. And as you can see here, this is your herd. So you have a good, you can see exactly who's who. You can pull up information on the individual animal and, take a look at them that way. On the screen here, I mentioned the audio cues being the principal method of containment. This is what that 92-90 means. This is indicating that 92% of the time, the animal's responding to just the audio cue alone. So you can see it's really high numbers for the audio. That's principally what's keeping them inside of the paddock area, which is, again, pretty safe. I'll just show you a demo of how to make a paddock real quick. So I'm just going to grab a random area. So I can make a virtual paddock. I just select create, and I can be really dynamic with my shapes. So I'm just kind of going about as I wish. And as I go, I can measure. So I get measurements of my distances. So 0.11, 0.14. So if I know the actual lengths of my area, I can draw it by hand, or again, GPS. The other cool feature is exclusion zones. So once I've built my paddock, I can add in an exclusion zone for, say, things like archaeologically sensitive areas or riparian. So I can demarcate an area that I want my cattle to stay out of. So just like that, I'm able to create a zone where the animals will be free to roam here, but unable or will be stimulated to stay out of this exclusion zone as well. So that's a pretty useful feature if you've got riparian areas. Can the base stations, sorry, I'm just seeing the questions here. Can you move the base station with the cattle? Yes, you can. You do need to move the base station. So like it does take a little bit of work to do that, but you absolutely can move the base station along with the cattle, providing that you've still got good cell phone coverage in doing so, which is again why the Starlink application is probably the most practical for folks in British Columbia. And can the base stations repeat? The yes and no. What can happen is if you have multiple daisy chain base stations, the signal, like it might take a little bit longer for the communications to reach all cattle, but it will increase your area of coverage. But it can create situations where it's a little bit slower to work just because it's got a lot more communications channels to work through. With this as well, you get a lot of notifications. So you can see so we've got some collars that are down. They're just charging in the area over here. So you can see you've got a lot of things to play with. I'm not going to go through all the details here, but it's pretty dynamic in that regard. The ability to draw and create unique shapes is a massive feature for folks, as well as the use of exclusion zones so you can keep them out of things that you don't want them to be in. Can pastures overlap? Yeah, they absolutely can, but only one pasture. It depends. So if you want them to overlap and you have two different mobs or herds that are sharing the same water source, that can absolutely happen. You just have to have one paddock associated to one herd and one paddock associated to the other. So a lot of folks would share the same water source if it makes sense. Can you have more than one base station? Yep, you can have more than one base station. It would increase your distance that your area could cover, or like that you could have paddocks in, but it could create a situation where you just take longer for your virtual paddocks to communicate to what you're desiring them to, or what moves you're looking to do. So it might just take longer for your virtual paddocks to spin up or to take effect, or it might take longer for communications to come back from the caller to your laptop or cell phone. But yes, you can have multiple base stations. But that's also why working with someone from Okanagan Ranch and Fence to figure out, what are you trying to do? What is the best method? In most cases, you might not need 2 base stations. You might just simply want to move your base station as appropriate. It all depends on your topography, how many callers, size of your herd, what you're looking to do, etc. So best recommendation is to work with somebody from our team to figure out what's the most cost-effective and practical solution for you. So I'm just going to quickly go back to presentation. Got a video here that, sorry, my video's not going to work. Just more questions in chat. Does each base station require a Starlink, or do they connect off of a home system? You can connect, no, you don't need one Starlink, like a Starlink Mini per base station. It can connect off of like a home-based router, which is, I think we actually will have somebody giving a case study today of how they actually just use their home Starlink system to do this. So no, you don't need a one-to-one relationship with base stations and Starlink. You can have one Starlink that covers multiple base stations. That is the beauty of the Starlink as well, more so because it's great connectivity in remote areas. But of course, with all things, there's limitations to technology. So you can't edit an active paddock. So once a mob or herd has been assigned to a containment area, you cannot change the shape, as I was doing very easily and quickly. That's a safety feature, so you don't accidentally create a situation where an animal is going to be zapped or given an audio pulse without just cause, effectively. So if you want to edit a paddock, you need to create a new paddock or turn that paddock off. You can only have one exclusion zone, which I mentioned. There are plans to do an update to this from Shepherd, but I just can't tell you when that's coming. I do believe it's coming somewhat soon. Paddocks can take up to 40 minutes to activate, so it's not instantaneous real time. And that's because of the big communications channels that I was showing you. The more base stations, the more topography, et cetera, the more time things could take. So 40 minutes is what you typically see with a LoRa setup.
Can you feed Pixie, please?
Better feed Pixie.
And yourself.
This time. GPS signals, it's every 10 minutes. It's not real time. And a couple recommendations or things to note: calves aren't going to be fitted, so they won't be contained by the system. They can move freely about. So if you've got archaeological area or riparian, those calves can freely roam throughout there. So just be cognizant of that. We don't fit the calves mostly because they'll fall off, or they could become too tight if the animal's growing, and it's might not be the best for the animal itself. So just be cognizant that if you have a lot of calf in your herd, that they will still be able to roam freely. However, they will, of course, always stick close to mom. You can have unfitted cows and fitted cows with the collars in the same area, but it's recommended that you keep them separate. It depends on the attitudes of the animals, etc. But what could happen is you could have situations where those that are moving freely might create a situation where the herd tries to move and then gets auditory or electrical pulse, which could be a little, frustrating for the animal. So if you're going to do that, I'd recommend watching the herd and making sure that everyone's responding safely, you're not unduly stressed. Some folks were asking about a mix of LoRa and cell phone neckbands, if that's possible. Technically, yes, but I would recommend not doing that. It would create a lot of headaches in terms of your system, in terms of your management. You basically have to toggle between multiple screens, and there's multiple points of failure. So though it's technically possible, I would strongly recommend we just go with one or the other. And again, for folks in British Columbia, LoRa is probably going to be your best friend. Just a question, can you select the animals you want to move without moving the whole herd? Yep, absolutely. That's the beauty of the system. That's the dynamic approach. So you can isolate an individual animal and create their own paddock and create a series of paddocks to slowly open and close or push them through an area. That's actually how you would deal with an escaped animal. So if for whatever reason an animal broke through, like I said earlier, it's not a crisis. You'll see where they are on the GPS. You can now snap on a new paddock to that individual animal and create a runway for them to go back to the primary herd. So absolutely, you can select an individual animal and move them alone without moving the herd. That said, because of the dynamics of this, there's a technical learning curve. the system. If computers aren't your thing, or if this is or working with GIS, GPS, etc., is new to you, it could be a little daunting. But like I said, there is great resources from Gallagher that you can learn independently, or you can work with us at Okanagan Ranch, and we can get you to set up your fences and answer any of the basic questions that you have as well. So I will bring it back to Sarah to go over some of the pricing questions, but I'll be monitoring chat if you've got any questions on the technical side of things as well. Over to you. Oh, yeah, good comment. Before I do that, any questions on the technical side of things that I could answer for you? So to bring them back, you'll have to open the main paddock. No, so it's all virtual. So you're not opening anything. So what you're doing is creating a one-to-one relationship where a collar is assigned to a paddock. So if I want to bring an animal back, I simply create an association between the collar and my new paddock, push them into the general footprint of the existing paddock with my herd, and then just move that collar to the main herd. It sounds a little complicated in the way I described it, but it is quite simple. All you're doing is basically assigning an animal to a virtual paddock and then bringing them back into the herd, switching their one-to-one relationship from the escapee paddock to the primary herd that you want them to stay in. How does the RFID on the phone app work? That might be a bit complicated to go over in its entirety, but your cell phone has an embedded RFID reader. This is what you can use to tap your credit card payments if you wanted to. So there is RFID inside your phone. What eShepherd is doing is just activating its use. So it's allowing you to use the native RFID reader inside of your cell phone and assign it or give it the ability to assign a collar to your animal's EID tag if they have one. So it's simply just accessing existing features inside of your phone for the application of assigning tags. You can also buy an RFID reader from eShepherd, which is a very long piece of equipment. It's quite sturdy and it's made for really big assignments. The cell phone is great if you've got 60-ish herd or 60-ish head or 100 head or something like that, and you're okay putting your cell phone in that potential to drop. But if you've got a big herd or you're going to be doing lots of moves, you can have that proprietary RFID tag. Do you see any updates coming that would allow cell connectivity through new satellite texting capabilities? They do have updates all the time to the technology, once every month or two, that would allow new satellites texting capabilities now present in iPhones to select cell networks. I'm not really sure I understand the question. Yeah, I'm sorry. David, I'm not sure if I understand that.
It's good. I'll just unmute myself here quickly. I just have a tenure holder that is very interested in virtual fencing, but the area they're in, there is no cell coverage and the topography would be very limiting.
Right.
He's an iPhone user, and I know a lot of iPhone users have recently gained the ability to text via satellite out in the field where we have no cell coverage. And he's just keen to learn if that new technology could be implemented with the virtual fencing technology so that you don't have a cell tower necessarily, but you're able to kind of utilize your cell phone based off like GPS and satellite.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, that's a great comment. I can't answer that in terms of what Gallagher's planned to do. I could totally see that being a use case in future, or where the product would like to go in future, just because it would give really good cell coverage. With the cell phone today using that technology, I'm guessing it's because the communications channel isn't as nearly as much data as Gallagher would be using. So I would imagine if Gallagher was to do that, they'd have to have their own satellite system or some kind of an agreement to do that. With the iPhone, I'm pretty sure that's like they're still paying to use those satellites that are up in space to allow them to have that feature. So Gallagher probably has to go through a bit more contractual stuff to get access to satellites that are currently in play, hence why we just use Starlink for now. If Gallagher was to send up their own satellites or pay to use existing satellites and like cover that coverage, I could see that being something that comes along, but I just wouldn't say it's coming anytime soon. The system doesn't shock the escapees as they come back in. Yeah, the system does not shock any animal as it comes back in. Again, it's a safety feature. We want to make sure that they come back into the herd. So if they do escape for whatever reason, the system cools down and doesn't continuously shock them. As soon as they get back in, they're protected. Any other comments or questions that I can answer on the tech side of stuff? Okay, if not, we'll chat at the end, and I'm going to switch now to Sarah.
I am going to talk to you guys about the pricing structure of these. So as Adam talked about, there's two options, cellular or LoRa. So the neckbands have a minimum of 20 neckbands ordered no matter which technology you choose. So they're around $415, or if you order 60 or more, then they drop down to $350 each. No matter which one you choose, they are subscription based, so it's $2.50 or $2.25 a month. But if you don't have your cattle using them, for example, in winter, you can hibernate the neckbands, and then you're not paying the subscription costs throughout periods of time that you're not using them. If you require LoRa, then you'll need a base station, which is $6,000, and that requires also a Wi-Fi station. And then there's a couple of different accessories that depend on your use case, whether you have bulls or if you want to get some spare parts sort of thing. So that's the cost of them sort of in a nutshell. I'm briefly going to talk about some funding options here. So these are funding options that I'm just outlining for folks in British Columbia. There are funding options for people who are in other provinces as well, but I'm just going to briefly talk about these ones here. So there is two programs essentially. There's one called OFCAF and then one that is the beneficial management practices. And so OFCAF is delivered through two different partner organizations, the IAF and the Canadian Forage and Grasslands Council. And so they fund 85% or 70%, depending on which one. And there is an intake window opening on February 1st, but you need to get organized before February 1st because you need to register your business, and that takes a couple days. So if you are looking to have neck bands in your program, there is that funding available, but just get started with that application before February 1st so that you are ready to go. You also need either a grazing plan or an agrologist to partner with you on it. So if you're planning on getting funding, just take a look at that beforehand. And if you need help with that, you can always reach out and we can help you with that. Then there's also a program called the Beneficial Management Practices Program. You need an environmental farm plan, so that takes a little bit of time to get that sorted. The funding window is not open for that yet, but it'll be coming in probably early 2026. So again, if you're wanting that to fund your program, just get yourself organized by doing an environmental farm plan. Okay, there's more tech questions. I'll just let Adam handle those ones. So I'm going to hand it over to, so he is a master's student with TRU, and he is going to talk about some cost comparison of looking at physical fence versus virtual fence. So he's doing this analysis on perimeter fencing an area. So as I had mentioned earlier, there are a number of features that virtual fencing allows you to do, such as rotational grazing. But because we don't know how folks want to do the rotational grazing, if they want to move cattle, for example, 3 times a day, or if they want to move them once every 3 days, it's really challenging to do a cost comparison on a rotational grazing setup. So Felipe has done some analysis based on perimeter fencing and the cost comparison between them. He is a student under Dr. Church, and so Dr. Church is going to give him a brief introduction before Felipe goes ahead and chats about his cost comparison. I'll turn it over to Dr. Church to do the intro and then to Felipe.
I think John had a problem, so I can talk. I'm not sure if he's in the meeting, but okay. So thanks, Sarah, for introducing me. So today I will talk about cost comparison between physical fancy and virtual fancy. I had a bachelor degree in animal science. I'm a master's student in cattle production, São Paulo State University, Unesp, Brazil. And I've been working with virtual fancy collars as a TRU intern at Wild Dry Ranch project in Horsefly, BC. Next, please. So the objective of this analysis compare cost per head for perimeter fancy in area with physical fancy, virtual fancy with LoRa neckbands, virtual fancy with cellular neckbands. The use points is year 1, 8, 16, and 24. Next, please. The parameters I've used is the number of cattle, 2,200 to 1,000 heads, correlated with size area. We used 1.2 hectares per animal for an animal unit per month. The collar cost is $350 each, replaced every 8 years. LoRa Gateway 6000 replaced every 8 years as well. Subscription $2.50 per month for cellular subscription and 2.25 dollars per month for LoRa per head. The accessories average cost is around $35 per head. For estimate the property area, we estimating in the total area, assuming a square paddock, increased 5% of this total area of fancy. The number of units we estimated range 10 kilometers, 10 rand. We know everything depends. The maximum range is 20 kilometers for Lura, but we need to be more conservative in this analysis. So the maintenance rate for physical fence is 2% start in year 5. Physical fence cost is $40 per meter. The labor cost, just a moment. The labor cost physical fence 2.5 hours head per year. The virtual fence is 0.5 hours head per year. And the wage estimated is 30 Canadian dollars per hour. And the key of this labor saver is basically move the animals to the next paddock and the routine inspection of the animals. So in the go next, please. So in this first analysis for a small area, we had 20 heads for 24 hectares, 100,000 Canadian dollars over 24 years. We can see the big difference between the virtual fence with LoRa and the cellular for a small herd. And go to the next for the area. For the area, we had 200 heads and 240 hectares for these total animals. The total saving is 285,000 over 24 years. We saw here the smaller difference between the virtual fence with LoRa and the virtual fence with cellular for a medium herd size. For a large, go to the next, please. For a large area, we with 2,000 heads and 2,040 hectares, we have a total saving of more 400,000 Canadian dollars of 24 years. And we need to see here the VF, the virtual fence with cellular subscription is a little more expensive than the virtual fence with LoRa expensive. LoRa in a large herd size and 24 years. So the overall of this analysis, we see the difference between the physical fence and the virtual fence depends of the paddock size and the herd size. The LoRa had a small effect on the final cost when the herd size were medium or large. We had a strong effect of labor costs on these total expenses, and the solar subscription for virtual fence became more expensive over time and the herd size compared to LoRa subscription. So I asked Sarah for a real case to show today, and she sent me 2 areas of Tennessee's ranch. So this first area, we had more than 4,000 fence length of real area and rand length perimeter, more than 8,000 meters of fencing. And they grazed 300 heads in this area. So in this area, we have total saving of more than 500,000 over 24 years, considering the range. So in this graph, we can see the big difference in this between physical fancy cost and the virtual fancy cost with LoRa and with cellular. Go to the next. And in the other area, we had a bigger with fence length with almost 6,000 meters of fancy, and the rand land perimeter around 30,000 meters of fancy, and they grazed just 200 heads in this area. So in this area, we had total saving more than $2 million over 24 years, considering this range. And we can see the big difference of cumulative cost per head in this area for between physical and virtual fence. So the overall for this analysis, in the first area, we had a higher animal unit per month. So we had more pressure in this area. And even considering the accessories cost, the lure cost, and all the colors cost, it's cheaper the physical fence, and we had an increased risk of overgrazing in this area. In the second area, we had a large grazing area. However, the cost of this physical fence increased disproportionately with fence, making it more substantially more expensive than virtual fencing. So if you have any questions, I will be to answer in my email. We have any questions, Chef?
Does anybody want to unmute themselves and ask Felipe any questions? And to like reiterate, when he was doing that analysis on Thiessen's Ranch, he was doing it on the cost of fencing if there was to be perimeter fencing around that range area. So that doesn't exist right now. There isn't perimeter fencing around the range area, but if somebody was considering complete containment using traditional fence, that's the cost difference.
Yeah.
No other questions? Thanks, Felipe, for doing that analysis for us. Okay, so I am going to just give a super brief introduction and then hand it over to Julie. So there is a case study that Julie is going to speak to, as well as Josh Thiessen. So this is a ranch that's up nearby Fort St. John. They are using the Gallagher LoRa neckbands. They were installed in the middle of October and have been on since then on 98 head of Angus cross heifers. They were grazed until the end of November, then they were supplemented with silage and hay. So this is a project that Julie Robinson was spearheading, and she's going to speak now about her involvement in the project, her experiences, why she started this project, and anything else that comes to her mind. So heading it over to Julie, if you can just introduce yourself and then take it away.
Great. Thanks, Sarah. Anything else that comes to my mind? Yes. I'm currently sitting in Dawson Creek, and I have been working with the Northeast Range team for about a year in the role as a range officer. And so when I first joined the range team in a different capacity in about 2021, I first saw a presentation on virtual fencing out of the States in a Society for Range Management seminar. And as you've heard already, the opportunities seemed endless. And so since then, I've been working on trying to find funding and bringing this into our region because, you know, we're such a large region and there's so much opportunity. So finally, we have been successful in getting money and supporting bringing callers in and hiring Okanagan Fence and Lee and Sarah and Adam and their team to help us explore this and deploy them. As may be typical to some government scenarios, we got our funding a little late, and so we didn't get our collars out on Crown land, which is the intended result for next season. But thankfully, Thiessens were willing to work with us and deploy these collars on their cattle that they had at home and start using them this season with full intentions that we'll have full 400 collars out in the Peace region next summer, if not more, if I can't find some more funding. So just a bit of an overview. In the Peace region, we have about 190 range agreement holders with cattle, and we have about 100,000 animal units, which is about 22,000 head of cattle that our region is trying to manage on the land base, over about 1.3 million acres. So that's about 60 acres of cow. And we have 9 community pastures, which represents about of that area. And all of this to say that there's a lot of animals and a large land base, and this seems like a great tool to help us work with that, because fencing all that seems like a daunting, there's the right word, daunting endeavor. So in terms of, you know, how I got funding and worked with other people to convince them that this was an opportunity, one of the things that, you know, became a higher priority for deploying virtual fencing or exploring it is our nation partners have also been doing their homework about how to manage livestock on the land base. And so they also came on board and aligned and, we're requesting this demonstration on our land base. And so that really helped us get funding to support trying this out in the Northeast region. So I think virtual fencing for crown grazing is a way to meet regulatory compliance. It will help us meet our First Nation partnership objectives. There's the economic benefits that Sarah and team have just spoke to. And I think just animal health and economics on the ranch as well. I think there's great opportunity there. So I just will speak briefly to the compliance component. And so there are 6 objectives that are set by government in the range practices regulation, the range planning practices reg. And so they speak to soils, forage, water, fish, wildlife, and biodiversity. And so to me, the virtual fencing is an excellent tool to support us at a lot of those objectives. So, for example, if you are grazing cattle and you have a river running through your area and the cattle are direct accessing water, sometimes those areas can become overutilized and have quite a bit of negative impact on the ecosystem. And as Adam had showed us, we can move points of access to that river for direct access. And so when we were first getting into this, there was another fellow who was working with Fennels, David, who was showing us, he's like, I just move my river direct access every couple of weeks so that I don't have some major degradation in some areas, or I move it to gravel pads where it's better for them to access, which was a pretty cool concept as a landscape level manager. And so the other added benefit of this I can see is, the reduced need for cross fencing in our region. And that cross fencing, doesn't just hit our economic goals, but also deals with reducing fence on the land base for wildlife and treaty right access and all those other components as well. So I feel like that is a big checkbox for us. I did want to speak a little bit to, Adam had told us about exclusion areas and ways that we can build. We didn't talk about ways that you can build exclusion areas off of your boundary as well, but this would allow us to protect some key cultural features while still grazing cattle on the land base as well. So if you've got a burial site or something that's critical that First Nations have identified, instead of before, we didn't have a lot of options except for perhaps excluding cattle from that range. I'm hoping this is a tool where we can draw our exclusion area and cattle continue to graze in the tenure without having that area being impacted, or at least timing when cattle might go through there, depending on the situation. So there's a whole bunch of components that I think that this helps us deal with our First Nation partners that allows cattle to continue to access Crown Range while respecting that piece. And I think we've gone through the economics quite a bit, but I did just want to say, in our region, we have over 2,500 miles of perimeter fence. And if you look at that at the $40,000 a mile, that is a lot of money that we have invested in fencing in our region. And if we were doing that 25-year depreciation that Philip was talking about, that's basically $4 million a year that you would need to spend on fencing to maintain that $100 million investment in fencing that we have. And so it's quite a lot of fencing, and that's just perimeter. And so when I was looking at the cross fencing that we have within our systems, if you're on a community pasture, the investment in cross fencing is phenomenal. And so when Sarah was presenting and Philippe was presenting the numbers on the economics is, the more cross fencing that we have, which allows better forage management, the more the return on this investment is there, I think. So a final thought was just that I'm also ranching with my partner, Bill Wilson, and, we've been looking at this from a ranching perspective as well. And so looking at that investment for 100 head, that would probably be about $6,000 of our investment using the funding that Sarah had highlighted. And, this year we spent $10,000 plus on electric fencing systems, and we lost a couple cattle in a dugout. And with the virtual fencing system, the management options that come to us, I was like, the dollars and cents make a lot of sense because we are constantly moving land base. We don't own all our own land. And so it's we don't have to make the investment on someone else's land. We can use these collars as a tool to access other rental places and manage that and protect them against dugouts in the wintertime and those pieces. So it just makes so much sense from a rancher perspective as well, I feel. And I'm sure Josh will talk a bit more about that. Josh and I've had a lot of fun brainstorming things that we can do with virtual fencing. And so I think the sky's the limit, or your imagination is the limit. Just as far as next steps from Ministry of Forests role is, this has been a short-term project with the Okanagan Fence Group. I am hoping to find more funding to continue to support virtual fencing in our region. But I do think as a region, I want to work with the cattle industry around purchasing some base stations so that not all operations would need them. And that could be something where, like, if there's a base station on Bear Mountain Tower, that's a fairly big area where you could get quite a bit of coverage, and a number of producers could potentially benefit from that. So, working in our region so that not everyone needs a $6,000 base station, how can we improve those situations as well? So those are some of the thoughts that I had. Sarah, I'm happy to transition to you. I assume you would like to introduce Josh. So thank you for that opportunity.
Thanks, Julie, so much for talking there. Maybe I'll just, since Julie, I know you have to jump off in 10 minutes. Before I switch to Josh, I'm just going to open up the floor to see if anybody had any questions for Julie before she has to duck off in 10 minutes. Maybe also, Julie, do you mind giving your email address in the chat?
Sure.
So if folks have any, want to connect with you particularly, but just before we go to Josh, anybody have any questions for Julie?
Hi there, Julie. I was wondering, as you're talking about using this virtual fencing technology for community pastures and on Crown Range, has your district done any thought into how the cost sharing of that will work long term? As we know, when district will pay for fencing, but then long term the fencing is the maintenance of it is a responsibility of the agreement holder. So do you foresee that being the same situation with virtual fencing? So like long term, the agreement holders are then going to be responsible for the cost and upkeep of the collars. As we know, like the collars have a 7-year lifespan. So then at that 7-year mark, is it up to the agreement holder to replace all the collars?
Yeah, thanks, David. Trick question, eh? I think Lila has spent a bit more time with those bigger thoughts because she's been working with the wildfire fence recovery program. So she might have a better answer. In our region, because we're targeting priority situations for specific reasons, we've been footing the bill for the collar purchase, and then there's a component where the ranchers will be covering the subscription costs in the future. I don't think that I've thought through, like in my mind, I haven't got to the point where Ministry of Forests would be purchasing collars for the entire grazing region and how we would recover that. I think in various scenarios, I'm certainly interested in trying to work to figure out funding and pieces to get it together. But I don't think there's a long-term vision of because this is the problem in our region. We have, $100 million in fencing, and we're not paying to do the replacement in 25 years either that needs to be there. So if I could pitch that to the executives and get funding for it, I'd be all over that. And like virtual fences are a part of that, but I don't think there's a good answer for that at the moment.
Okay, yeah, I was just curious. Again, I'm waiting on more stuff from Range Branch as well. I just thought maybe in your district, especially since you guys are more unique than the rest of us with the community pastures, just thought maybe you guys might have a bit of insight there and hopefully lead the charge for the rest of us in the south of the
Well,
province.
if I find secret money, I'll be sure to let you know once I've spent my portion.
I appreciate that. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Julie. So we'll just transition now to introducing Josh Thiessen. So Josh is from the Thiessen Brothers Ranch in Fort St. John and is kind enough, or has been kind enough, to be the case study for our Okanagan Ranch and Fence and Ministry of Forests partnership. So I'll just move it to Josh now to maybe introduce yourself and walk us through a bit of the project.
Hey, thanks, Adam. Can you guys hear me all right? Yeah. Okay, my name's Josh, and me and my wife ranch alongside my dad and my brother-in-law and my sister and 2 other brothers, and we run about 570 to 600 set of mother cows. We feed about 800 cows in the winter, 800 animals in the winter. We also make our own feed, do a little bit of custom silaging, and in the winter then do a little bit of logging as well on the side with our own equipment. I say that just to kind of help you realize that time maybe isn't everything that we have extra of. And so the reasons to use the neck bands was not only for the cost of the challenge and the cost of maintaining perimeter fence or cross fences, but also just for the opportunities that it brings into our operation as well, managing our grass, managing our some of our range. When Julie brought this up, we were excited to use it and try it. It gives us lots of opportunity to expand the opportunities in the range. Some of that being just the challenges of the topography. We have lots of bush and lots of hilly, challenging ground to fence, and lots of fence to maintain. So for us, using the neck bands has been super successful, I guess. There was some questions about even moving cattle back and forth. It's really simple to use these things. What I did is it took me about 30 minutes to set up some of the fences, the virtual paddocks, and then scheduled them to move every morning at 4 a.m. just before the cattle, or that was later on here in the fall. So the cattle weren't getting up until about 5:30 or so. And so I just had it scheduled so that it would move every morning at about 4 a.m. by the time, and it would take, like he said, Adam said, about 40 minutes to update to all the collars. So most of the collars were updated by the time the cattle started moving. They'd hit the original fence line, find that it wasn't there, move on, and I did them 50 yards every morning. And while we were doing that, also, there was a lot of snow on the ground. And so keeping them off of that fresh snow made it so that they didn't go out there, trample it, cause it to get crusty, and then not be able to graze in it. So I just would bump it, and that fresh snow, they were able to break it down and graze the grass. We grazed 98 head of cattle on 54 acres for about a month on old fescue. So again, the neck bands really made it easy to bump those cattle effectively, easily. And again, not much time. Like the one day I came in and 9 o'clock at night, and I was like, oh, I got to move the heifer. So I just jumped on the computer and moved the fence, and because I didn't have it scheduled, and those cattle just moved, and they were onto new grass, and it was easy. So that, and also when me and another producer were out there looking at it, we were looking at the grass and saying, on this total 110 acres of land, we would have been out here for like, maybe 15 days if we would have just turned them all out and let them use the whole thing. Now we got almost a month out of it. And then that was without any additional feed, and them heifers were in good shape. We started feeding in the beginning of November, and we did silage on that. But up till then, they were simply grazing, and that was a real success in that way. So the land, as you all know, isn't getting any cheaper, nor is range always getting easier. And so just with the challenges in that, it enables you to use the land that you already have more effectively without a bunch of labor and time invested in it. And also, there's lots of cool ideas in the neck bands that we've just been playing with as well, to sort cattle and to move them around in different ways. Some of that will be more of that will be trialed, I guess, next summer when we have them out on grass and in more of a grazing situation. So, but seeing with how effective the animals are responding to these collars, I can see it being effective in, even somebody asked if you can have cattle on multiple waters or multiple herds on one water. I think you can, especially once those cattle are well trained in this. I wouldn't do that, initially. I would make sure that these cattle are trained, and maybe what you want to do is add one herd to it, and not have the other herd there right away until maybe give them a week, and then let them, find their pathway, get that figured out, then add the next herd, and then one herd will already have it figured out. Just some of this is going to have to be played with a little bit. I don't think there's no direct or specific way to make it all work. As we breed cattle, it's still not just technology. It still takes a cattleman to kind of figure out how they work and just to incorporate that into your system. But for sure, like even with those heifers, I turned one in there that hadn't had a collar on for a while, and she stayed straight and true to the program. She didn't even break out. So yeah, lots of good reasons. We are super happy with the success in the collars. I think that there's going to be there's a lot of ease in it once you kind of get through some of the initial training or learning curves to it. The performance in the cold weather. Yeah, so as some of you know, we've had a lot of cold weather. It's been minus 36 here, minus 40 for a couple days, and a lot of snow. We've gotten at least 1.5 feet, 2 feet of snow in the last week. There's been times where those collars the batteries have been low. We had them pinging every 10 minutes, and maybe that was part of it. But then also what we did is Adam bumped it back to every 60 minutes here just the other day. So I was checking the collars and they were low to the point where it turned the fence off because the batteries were that low. But then it was one afternoon where we had a good set of sun and all the collars came back on. And all the fences came back on. So it is a bit tricky, and maybe some of those things with in the colder weather decreasing the pinging time on them when they connect to or when they check in with the base station would help with that battery life. But it has been cold, and there has been some really overcast days, and of course we don't get more than a few hours of sunlight maybe in those days. So and the collars all coming back on was something that I thought was pretty neat and unique to it. So I think that there's, good success in that. Those cattle that are still in a perimeter fence, but it's no more than a quarter mile away. And there's another set of cattle that they can see and hear. And when I would go feed those cattle first, and I had to come right past these set of heifers, and I bumped them back so that I didn't have to open and close the gate every day on them heifers. And they'd come right up to their line and yet would not cross it and come to it. And it was about an hour or so that before I'd come back, or an hour and a half before I'd come back and give them their silage. And they all stayed in their pen and didn't come through the gate. So I would say that was also successful. There was 4 in there that lost their collars just because we were learning how to collar them. And they all stayed with that herd. Now they've had it on for over a month now, so they stayed with it. But the batteries themselves, they have been, and the collars in the cold, when those cows would eat their silage, the silage being warm, there's a little bit of buildup, and even just those cattle bedding down, there's a little bit of buildup of crap silage on the front of the collar. None of that has affected the performance of those collars. So yeah, I would say they were successful. The performance in moving cattle from paddock to paddock, I covered that a little bit. It was super successful, especially when I had it on a schedule. They knew kind of when that time was, and you could see when you check back in, they would be there and they'd be ready to move. And then when I switched sides on that, scenario that Adam was showing you before of our fence, I switched them from one side to the other. I opened it up, let them across, and shut it behind them, and I did that within a 24-hour period and moved. They figured that out within the first hour and a half, and that was a good move. That wasn't even in the direction that they had been traveling before, and they all moved up there and stayed in it. The one time, just because as I was learning some things, I ended up shutting the fence down, and they all moved outside of the fence because the fence went down, and I went out there with the tractor and a bale, and then put the bale inside, and they got to the line. They were coming from the west back to the east. The east side of the pasture is what they had been, and the west was where they had gotten out. They came back to the line, and they all stopped at the line, even though the collars weren't pulsing or giving them an audio, because they can just cross back through it. And they all got to that line and they stopped and they wouldn't go across. And so then one heifer was going, and I honked my horn at her for a minute there on the tractor, and they're very responsive to the audio. When I honked the horn, she backed off and almost ran into the tractor because she was backing off from that audio, and which was a cool little lesson there. So just to see how responsive they were to it was neat to me as well. But anyways, the fence was on, and they all crossed back in once I got them across the line, and so yeah, none of them were shocked while going back in. I don't know if there's much to add to that, more.
Yeah.
It was. Go ahead, Adam.
I was just going to say, just looking at the time with 15 left, perhaps any challenges specifically that you encountered, or if you would like to highlight. I did see a comment as if you've experienced any damage in running them through the sleeves, or any damage to the collars, that kind of thing. And then perhaps we can go into some Q&A as well. So any challenges specifically you want to highlight there, Josh?
No, in the squeeze, no. We run a Cadillac squeeze. We took one of the neck holders off. Like on the Cadillac, there's 2 bars that come out front that hold them. We just took one of them off just so that it didn't give us, or it gave us room to access the neck there a little better. But yeah, no, none of that was bothered. And running them up the alleyway, and like we run them all through again, and there was no damage to it. And even in the pasture, like there was times where they were banging them around on stuff pretty decently, I thought, and no damage in that area. Yeah.
Any questions for Josh then, before we go into our Q&A? Any questions on the case study here with Josh's property?
There was trees, Sonia. There was trees that were, I guess, where I have the base station is at my house. I have it tied onto my house with a tower and connected directly into my Starlink. And then between me and the cattle, it's about 1.5 miles, and there's lots of tree cover, and they're tight to the trees. On the most of it, they're out in the open, but they can get in tight to the trees. And it did decrease the amount of times that they connected. Plus, it slowed down when there was overcast or heavy snow. It didn't always. Sometimes it was 5 to 10 hours, and maybe that's changes in the summertime better. I'm not sure. That the snow was pretty dense, and the overcast was pretty heavy as well. And there was some pretty big hills and a creek in between ourselves and the house. I think that there's still some trials that need to be or just some tests in the canopy, heavy canopy. I was super surprised with how fast those collars came back on. So I think in the canopies, in the trees, as long as there is a bit of time during the day that they're hitting that good sunlight, I don't think that it's going to be too big of a challenge with the battery. I mean, we'll see. We're still all figuring some of this stuff out, but and the connectivity, I've taken some of the collars out into the trees, and they still connect fine. I guess depends on your distance would be a big thing.
And when in your experience then, Josh, any issues with moving or pushing the herd from paddock to paddock or to pasture, moving them around? Any issues with that configuration for you?
No, there hasn't been. Once they get it figured out, it's pretty simple. Pushing them from one to the next. I mean, and it took about a week, and these cattle were pretty effective in moving and finding that fence and following it. I have some pretty good videos of where they bounced off that boundary. They would hit it, it would audio ping, and they would come back off of it and kind of bump down that line. Kind of the same as pushing cattle down in a physical fence. They just learned to feel it more on the audio than on the physical fence themselves. Moving them down an alleyway, like that one is pretty narrow that they moved down, and pushing them down there and even holding them down there, we had to end up roping one of them. And so we just eased them down into that alleyway, roped them down in there. And of course, you got to be a little bit, again, maybe cowboy like feel a little bit, the cattle be able to read them. But yeah, like you give her a chance, she won't run through that boundary if given the opportunity. You can push them through if that's what you want to do, but it's not what most people want to do.
Nice. Okay. Well, thank you for that, Josh. That's it from us. So we'll go into a Q&A. If you do want to drop off before the Q&A, though, if you want to send us a message, you can do so at okanaganranchandfence.ca, or check us out at okanaganranchandfence.ca, or write us at info@okanaganranchandfence.ca. We'll send off links to that after the end of this as well. But just general Q&A session for folks. If you'd like to ask any questions, now's a great time to do it. Technical and or otherwise, we can get through it. So let's see here in chat. Keeping calves over, could you add collars to the calves for weaning? Again, I wouldn't recommend fitting a calf with this system. A lot of factors will go into play. How long is it going to be around their neck, etc. So that could cause them to get a little tighter, or it could be loose and fall off. I would just recommend not fitting a calf with the system. Any chances you get a recording? Yeah, so we're recording this right now. We will send it to you folks, likely by a Google Drive, because it's going to be pretty hefty and big. And we'll make sure you get a copy of the deck as well. We'll also make sure to update the pricing because we do have a representative from Gallagher on the phone. When Sarah went through the pricing for the base stations, she was saying $6,000 for the base station plus $1,000. That's actually $5,000 for the base station. So that it's $6,000 for the entire unit with that Wi-Fi station, which Gallagher is getting rid of. And the Wi-Fi station was used principally to ensure that updates to the LoRa neckbands were done. So net result here is the numbers that you saw from Sarah, they're going to get a little bit cheaper with that. Let's see. Yeah. Okay. Some folks using the neckbands on calves. Great. Yeah. If it works. Any other questions for us? Technical, otherwise, pricing, etc. Or questions for Josh? Yeah. Okay. We did have some folks ask a few in chat. So here you go. Will it exist over existing LoRaN network? You'd still need the base. Like you could would need to discuss what that looks like for you, Crystal and Jordan, and see how that's configured. But yeah, we'll have to chat about that effectively. That's where that case-by-case thing comes into play. We want to make sure folks aren't going down a path that necessarily doesn't make sense, but we'd have to look at that. Can it move cattle from property to property? Yep, absolutely. We went over that. That's a big feature. Dynamic climates, extreme heat and cold. That's obviously going to be a big one in British Columbia. So with the base stations needing power, there could be concerns with snow buildup on those panels. But again, you can do 120 volts, or you can build a cover, or there's various ways to articulate these so that they're not building up snow. So there's that. And the manufacturer's rating for the collars themselves from eShepherd is -70 to +70 Celsius, but that's in practice, in field. We've got folks using it in -30 with no issues. I think part of that comes into where that product is coming from in New Zealand, where they just don't necessarily need to test much lower than that, but we're seeing a little bit different in terms of the extreme capabilities or extreme thresholds in practice. Infrastructure needs for collars. Just the base station for the LoRa neckbands, but it can run off 120 volt power for the base station. Otherwise, the cell neckbands, no additional infrastructure needed beyond the collars themselves. How close the towers need to cover? I think we chatted on that already, about 14K max if you're in perfect conditions, but again, it's going to be variable based on topography. Josh, any comments that you have about operating in cold weather?
Not too much, but I was going to say, somebody asked a while back about moving the cattle and if you have to move the base station. The cattle only have to connect every 24 hours. So what's easy enough to do is you just take your if you want to move the cattle, once everybody's updated, you just check in, make sure that everything's kind of updated, and then you can take your tower down, move it, and set it back up as long as they're connect back, towers up and running in 24 hours. You don't need the tower up all the time, right? So easy enough to take that down. You got 24 hours to move it if that's what you need to do. And so it's not, and if you have two of them, you can set another one up and then move those cattle to that area, and those collars will reconnect with that base station, right? As so that's just one thing that I thought I could add to it as well.
Yeah, no, that's a great comment.
Hey, Adam, I'm just going to jump in there. Also, what we're working on right now is a portable Starlink system that will be on a self-contained unit that for remote areas that you can move it around to pasture. And as well, we'll have the eShepherd base station on it, and we'll have the Starlink all self-contained, and both will have their own power source to run. So we're excited to see that happen, as I think it'll be just another tool that ranchers can use in British Columbia and other places here.
Anna Marie asked as well, if you remove the collars during the winter, do you have to replace the same collar to the same cow next spring, or does it matter? It doesn't matter. They're super easy to reassign to each cattle. I had one that working properly. I took the collar, brought it to the house. I needed Wi-Fi to do it, and I just reassigned a different call. I clicked on that animal list on the computer. I put in the new serial number from the collar, updated it, and away it went. And you can do that in a multi-group function or in a single animal function. It's easy to do. It's complicated once you kind of learn the limitations of the system.
A couple other questions here I see in chat. So we've got is breaking strength. So work in brushy areas where these things break apart. So I mentioned the breaking strength. This is a collar here. This is the that breaks away, or the piece that breaks away. It's about 750, 770 pounds of force required to break it. So it's not coming off the cattle anytime soon, but if they're hung up, they would be able to snap this thing off. Once it's snapped off, it's an easy enough piece to replace, and you don't have to replace the entire unit as well. I also forgot to mention that for the electrical pulse, it's actually traveling up and down these chains right here. So once they're around the collar or around the neck, they're going to have a really good connection points. So yes, you can operate these in brushy areas as well. They will break off if the animal is in danger. And is vandalism an issue for the tower so far? Nothing. I haven't heard anything, in terms of like human damage to there is be situations, I suppose, where they're getting brushed up against by an animal or something, or there's potentially some animal chewing on a wire here and there. But there's definitely to protect these base stations in practice and in field to prevent that or reduce that thing happening. But physical vandal, like human caused vandalism to towers, not something that I've heard of, but of course is always a possibility. Yeah, great base station combo. That's cool. Yeah, definitely. Oh, right. Vandalism is always a risk, I suppose, with things. We'll be sharing recording this. Yes, we'll be sharing a recording with as we mentioned earlier as well. Cool.
So just another kind of comment, because people did ask earlier, with one of the ranchers down in the South Okanagan, had these neck bands out for 3 years now. They're going into now. The first year they brought 150 head off the range virtually, and where they normally would take perhaps 5 or 6 trips out there over a number of weeks to find all their cattle, they brought them off in one day, basically in a half a day, virtually off a very remote range down to where they could haul the livestock back home. So I think it's got some super interesting concepts. And another thing that is as well in British Columbia didn't discuss was predator. If predators are doing their work out there, and the way the system is right now, you'll never know, or know too late, that your animal's been taken down, whether it's a wolf or a bear or whatever. But with these, because basically it's real time, you'll know and could know that animal, something's happened to it, so you can verify, was that a predator kill or not, kind of thing. So that's another tool that this eShepherd will provide for you ranchers out in Crown Range areas.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Lee. So I'm just sharing now. And we'll to wrap up. So again, thanks everybody for participating, and thanks for your questions. Thanks, Josh, Julie, and our speakers for today as well. We'll make sure everybody gets a copy of the deck and the recording, as we mentioned. And if you do have any questions for us at Okanagan Ranch and Fence, you can send us an email at info@okanaganranchandfence.ca. We also have if we didn't answer all of your questions, I've got a little survey that folks can fill out and get in contact with us there if that's what you'd like to do. So that's in chat for you. Okay, so thank you so much. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and we look forward to hearing from y'all. Take care.
Thank you, Adam.